boys are taught that like testosterone is bad, and so turn your testosterone down and be sensitive and be docile and be gentle and be tender and be caring to women. And so they kind of castrate themselves to some degree because they're taught that. And then there's a lot of women that do want that. But then I think my hunch is the thing that we're hitting up against in society right now is that, and I don't know if it's biological or on some more primal level of psychology of what it is that that's not attractive. And so there's kind of a catch-22 that both men and women are struggling with, which is like, on some more feminist level, there's kind of this message that men should turn down their testosterone and castrate themselves. But then that doesn't actually really work for eros or sex or attraction.
Coming all the way from Minneapolis to Washington, D.C., we now bring you Enter the Freud.
Warning, this is for entertainment purposes only. It is no way medical advice. Listen at your own risk.
I went down this manosphere trail because did you tell me about it? And I was like, what is this? So I kind of Googled it, and there's lots of articles on it, but no real clear, this is the manosphere, enter, kind of thing. But I did find an interesting documentary that I think was actually, I sent it to you, was kind of, it didn't have any judgment. It seems fairly balanced in the conversation about what it is or isn't. And
what the manosphere is.
Yeah, and what was the impetus for it, why are men attracted to this particular, I don't even think it's necessarily an ideology. I just think it's a space, right? And where do we fit? What do we do? And the thing I thought was most interesting about the whole thing was, well, there was a couple things, but one in particular was that they were talking to a feminist who was like, I'm an unapologetic feminist, and I believe that, whatever women are, whatever, should be, I don't even know if she actually thought it would be equal. I think kind of it seemed like she did say that she didn't think that women were inherently smarter than men, but then she said some other things that were slightly not quite in alignment with that. But at the end, after listening to what these men were saying, what's our place? Why are women simultaneously saying they want all these things and they don't want us to be like men or, the heads of the household? But then when we're not that, they don't like us, which seemed to be the problem, right? It's well, you want us to do a thing that you don't want us to do, and we're very confused, and then either way, we can't win. And so at the end of it, this lady is well, I guess I hadn't really considered what was it, evolution, something about evolution. I wish I could remember the term off the top of my head. But it was essentially saying, oh yeah, I didn't account for that women want men to be this thing. And
what thing?
Or want men to essentially be the heads of households and men in a certain way that's protective and is going to, what is it, support and provide for the family and be whatever the traditional male role is. But at the same time, I don't want that. And so then when you're not the breadwinner or when you're not the man that I want you to be, then I don't want you at all. And I'd rather be single or rather go do something else. She goes, well, I didn't really account for that. I need to go do some research. I was like, well, that was stupid. Don't you think you should have done that research beforehand, before you decided that we're going to I'm not saying you didn't need to, or, at some point upset the whole social apple cart, but then to say, well, I didn't really consider that women are kind of conflicting in their position on this and creating a space where men don't know how to exist anymore because no matter what they do, you're kind of telling them they're wrong. And so I was just like, well, that's that. And then they cut the stupid thing off at that point. And I was like, no, let's have that conversation.
This was a YouTube video or a podcast or something you're listening to?
Yeah, it was a YouTube video, but it was a documentary.
Oh, okay.
About what is the manosphere, why did it exist, who's part of it. There was a couple guys who were... And so what's your sense of... You said you had some reaction or thoughts about it. Well, that was my thought, mostly hers, which was, okay, well, you created an unwinnable situation for these men. And then she said something else in it that kind of... And what's the unwinnable situation? that you want women to be in a position where they're out of the house working and being kind of the dominant, figures.
They want the women to be the dominant?
Yeah, and like we want to own our shit, which is fine, I guess. But then also, and in some ways say we don't want the men to be in this patriarchal, whatever that is, or
we don't want the men to be in a dominant position.
Right, but then we want them to be.
And what do you mean then they want them to be? How do they want them?
They want them to be. They want them to be the breadwinners. They want them to make more money. Uh-huh. But if you're occupying over 50 or 60% of, the managerial positions now, well, where do you think those dudes are? Mm-hmm. Well, now they're over here. So, which is fine if that's what you said you wanted, but now you don't want it because they make less money than you, and now they're worthless human beings to you. Well, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it does seem like there's a statistic problem in dating as women rise, and women have like totally taken over and are dominating education now. And so then fast forward into the future, they're going to increasingly be taking over more and more of the higher managerial positions. And so the men are going to be going under them, but the women are only looking upwards in terms of who they want to date. Yeah. And the pool's getting smaller of the men who are above them, and the pool's getting bigger of the men who are below them, and they're not looking down to want to date any of them. Right. It's sort of like just an inherent mathematical problem.
Right. That's true. And then also demonizing them for not being what you want them to be when you already said that that's not what you wanted. And you went at it. You wanted to be you wanted a matriarchy. Fine. Up to you. But again, then you can't get mad and then demonize the people that you just said you wanted to be in that position, right? Like, and the other thing she said, which I thought was really interesting, and is probably going to be a controversial thing that I said, or that I'm going to say, is that she was like, well, the post-industrial economy is just better suited for women's talents and how we think and how we do things, which made me think, well, didn't you always say that there really wasn't a gender difference? Uh-huh. And so now you're saying there is, right? Because when men said that, you said that was an invalid argument. Totally. So how do you account for now this new argument that says there's something inherently, at least according to this particular structure of an economy that, well, we just happen to naturally be best suited for? Right. Well, how's that?
Yeah. If you really look at that statement, we can start with, okay, in the post-industrial thing, she's saying women have skills, and let's call them verbal communication, relationship skills that women perhaps are better at, and she's saying that, and so that's is advantageous to women. But then it's like, okay, so does that mean in the industrial or pre-industrial that women were inferior? She's kind of implying that. Or were they equal back then and now women are superior?
Right, well, because she just said there's nothing that's inherently true about any of the genders. Isn't that what we've always heard? Right. Like, okay, well then you just provided a counter to your own argument
when it suited her,
right? And I just wanted to be like, do you hear yourself? Like, because then admit that men and women have different talents. Yeah, that's fine. Again, all these things are fine if you're just intellectually honest. Yeah. about where you're going with it and what you mean. Yeah. So okay, so now what? And if you say, okay, well then, because the other argument would be, well, it's social. Okay, then now you've provided a counter. Now you've provided the resolution to your problem. Now that just means we need to, provide different skills to these boys instead of saying, well, we're just better than you. So get it together. Yeah. Because it wouldn't be a fair argument the other way. Yeah. If men said that to women, well, we're just better than you at this shit. So we would say, that's not right. We're the same. We have the same capabilities. Do we though? Because you just said we didn't. Yeah.
And so you sort of did discover what the manosphere is all about. It seems like you discovered it firsthand. You had your own manosphere reaction.
Well, it's because so much of the conversations right now don't even follow themselves logically. Like, if you listen to them, you could very easily say, well, you're just you're saying your logic doesn't apply universally, and then you're saying that it does, or that the reverse is true, but then, you know what I mean? Like, I had another conversation today. It's like, well, if you say, well, these people are just problematic and we need to fix them, they need to be expelled from society. But if they said the same thing about you, that would be an invalid argument. But why? Yeah. And at least acknowledge that your argument makes no sense. and then address it, you know, or then just throw the whole thing out and just be like, you know what, I just wanted that to be the thing. I wanted this to be the structure, and so I don't need no fucking logic. Like, what's the point? You know, and that's the thing about that. Like, we're spending so much time. Can you think about it? At this point in our society, we've decided it is okay, interestingly, to say 50% of the population is trashy. Trash. And you could say this about some other things, but we're going to talk about gender right now. So we could say 50% of the population is terrible, we don't need them, whatever. Like, everything about them is problematic. Why is that an okay argument right now? Like, because that flattens people to one, you know, very narrow, you know, place that they can exist. And we're saying that's okay to do, and not have a nuanced conversation about, okay, what is the society that we seek to have? What are going to be the pluses and the minuses to that? How do we address it? How do we make people feel that they're included or have a place in it? Or what's their new place in it? And let them be a part of the conversation too. I don't get to tell you.
And so what's, just to be clear about what you started off saying, you just said it's okay to say that 50% of the population is, just be explicit about.
I don't think that's okay to say that. No, I actually don't think it's okay to say that. That's what I'm saying. That's the weird space we live in.
No, I get what you're saying, is that in our culture it seems to be okay to say that, and you're saying it's not, but that in a certain parts of our culture it is okay to say that. In fact, in certain parts of our culture, you have to say that, or else people think you're not on board with cultural evolution or something. But how are they trashing 50% of the population?
Well, I mean, just, you know, what I particularly don't like is saying, I don't like this aspect. Like, let's think. Because I haven't even really figured out exactly what we mean by, like, what's problematic about being masculine. I haven't quite...
Like the term toxic masculinity.
Yeah, except for other than walking around like a giant asshole and calling women, hey, fucking hoe. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, exactly.
Let me see if I can describe it. The toxic masculinity is an image of a man who is selfish, self-absorbed, out of touch with needing to be considerate of others, sees women as beneath him, sees women just as sexual objects that he uses for his sexual gratification, kind of like lacks sensitivity to other people, and just kind of like bulldozes his way through the world, doing what he wants. If anyone doesn't like it or gets in his way, he yells at them and even threatens aggression or violence. That's kind of the image. That's kind of like the stereotype of the toxic masculine male.
Okay, because I don't know any man that's actually that way. I mean, any one of us could have any one of those traits. Like, I'm just as capable of being an asshole and running through people as anybody else, right? So it's like, does having any one of those aspects automatically make you toxic masculine? No, I don't think so. Because again, that makes humans flat, right? And all of us are complex, and we, you know, I think about it this way. Any person, even a murderer, we call them terrible or whatever, has someone they love, right? So in that, you can't flatten them. They're very complex just in that one thing, right? So in the same way, you can't flatten 50% of the population to this very narrow, you know, being. You just can't. I don't think you should. I mean, you can, but you should not do that. And so this kind of idea that it irritates me. It's like, I was just watching the Met Gala, or not watching it, seeing the pictures from Met Gala. And everybody has their fucking opinions that they need to stamp onto their goddamn dress or whatever. And one of them was like, something about peg the patriarchy. That's what it said. And I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? And also, how reductive, right? And so in that, also pegging is being fucked in your ass, right? So how is that not? Is it?
Yes, it is.
It is. So you're using a sexual thing to say, you know what I mean? Like,
they're like
you're using
abusing toxic masculinity with toxic masculinity.
Yeah, you're using something that's inherently to say men fuck other men in the ass, which also I would say has some maybe problematic gay undertones to it that you might want to address. You know what I mean? And then think, well, I'm a woman, it's cool because I'm woke. I know what no, you're not. You did a lot of problematic things in that one fucking shirt.
I think it's just a big cultural thing that's going on, and like you said, it's not just male, female. I think this is happening in a lot of different levels. That I think could be simplified as just the like pendulum swing. Is that there was these historical conditions where women were unequal and oppressed in a ton of ways, though maybe not as many as some people are saying, but they were in a ton of ways. And then the pendulum swings to the other, and that healthy equality, equilibrium is in the middle, but then the pendulum swings to the other side as just like a overcompensation.
Yeah, because anybody I think who's fucking rational should at least be like, just because it's like saying, you and I have talked about this before, I'm not necessarily, an eye for an eye. Well, you fucked with me, so now, I gotta fuck with you and fuck off. You know what I mean? Because I don't think that that's good for society.
No, that's not That's not movement in a higher to higher levels of evolution.
Right, and that seems to be kind of where we are in a lot of things. It's like, okay, so this group historically has been implicated in something, and I would argue you have to. A lot of ways, systemic things are created by the individual, but in a lot of ways, once it becomes systematized, it's, you have to kind of think about the individual and their interpersonal interactions slightly differently than you think about their position in the system, right? Yeah. And so it's to say, okay, these people had some kind of thing in the system, and they're actually kind of okay with it not being that way. Because I don't know that there's that many people who are like, I don't think that women should be in the... I don't know those people. They don't exist. I mean, they do, but they're very rare. Yeah. And then to say, okay, so this character doesn't exist, but because they did in a system, now it's okay that we make them horrible people or that we do things to kind of fuck with them, right? Yeah. And make them feel like they don't have a place in society anymore. I just don't think that that's useful.
No. And I think it's the very thing that was happening, say, 100 years ago in this previous historical thing. When women were oppressed, men were treating women as less human than them. Mm-hmm. And now this pendulum swing is, now these people are kind of doing the same thing now.
Right, but with a complete... but the thing that galls me the most is like, we're so thoughtful and we're advanced and we know No, you're doing the same fucking thing and you're just not self-aware enough to understand what you're doing, not being reflective. Yeah. And that's what I would rather see. I would rather see it saying, okay, you know what? Let's be reflective about what we're doing. Is this actually... What is the likelihood that this is going to result in something really good? Because it creates another problem, right? And like everything you do, you do something and then there's a consequence to that, and then you have to deal with the consequence. And at least be thoughtful enough to kind of go, oh, is that a consequence maybe women are willing to deal with that. But I don't think it's a good idea since it's 50% of the fucking population and now you got to deal with them, And
so, okay, so yeah, and that, what you're saying, or what I'm calling this pendulum swinging, overcompensating too far, the manosphere, the emergence of the manosphere was a reaction to the pendulum swinging too far to the other direction.
Yeah, because a lot of the guys in it, there was a couple, they make it seem like there's these weird guys on the internet, they're super weird incels, and they're like...
Which there are.
Yeah, and I'm not saying they don't exist, but one of the guys in it was like, my girlfriend told me I wasn't man enough, and she broke up with me and kind of dogged on, made me feel like a piece of shit.
Right, and he's like, I was trying to be sensitive because I thought that's what men were supposed to do in the 21st century, and then she broke up with me because I wasn't man enough. What am I supposed to do?
He did look kind of sad, and it was mean. Whoever his girlfriend was is not a very nice person. Right. And maybe she didn't mean to do it, but she did, and it wasn't, at least acknowledge that. And then... what's he gonna do? Go look for a way to feel like he kind of knows what is up and down. How am I supposed to be? And let's not fucking lie to ourselves. People always want to know what the other side wants, whatever their object of their desire is. If I'm a woman and I like women, I want to know what that woman wants me to be so that I can attract that woman. And the same would be true for women.
And there's been a message to men. In some subcultures, there's other subcultures that don't have this, like what we started talking about young Latina girls being taught that. So that's the opposite thing. But there's this subculture, and I think of it as more like white, educated, upper middle class. But I don't know that boys are taught essentially that like testosterone is bad, and so turn your testosterone down and be sensitive and be docile and be gentle and be tender and be caring to women. And so they kind of castrate themselves to some degree because they're taught that. And then there's a lot of women that do want that. But then I think my hunch is the thing that we're hitting up against in society right now is that, and I don't know if it's biological or on some more primal level of psychology of what it is that that's not attractive. And so there's kind of a catch-22 that both men and women are struggling with, which is like, on some more feminist level, there's kind of this message that men should turn down their testosterone and castrate themselves. But then that doesn't actually really work for eros or sex or attraction.
Right, and it didn't work when we did it with women. Now, it wasn't great for women. We didn't really like that.
What do you mean?
Like, because what we're telling men to do now is turn down all those things that make them whatever men. But we did that same thing in like the Christian time frame or whatever, pick a religion.
Oh, like the Victorian where women had to be super like...
Well, even up until recently, up until maybe the 60s, same thing. It's like, turn that part off and just be docile, like nice woman that your man wants. It's like exactly the same thought process, which is women aren't sexual. Women, shouldn't want to do these things and be in their full humanity, right? And the same thing we're doing with men now. Yeah. But for different reasons, because it used to be that, through the guise of religion or whatever, our society was built that way. And now it's not. It's some other, like, secular thing that we're doing. But
now it's like a feminist kind of like socio-political reason. Yeah. So there's all these men that are getting taught this. Turn your testosterone down. Castrate yourself, metaphorically. And they do... And they're rewarded by their moms, and they're rewarded by the women, but then eventually a girlfriend breaks up with them because they're not man enough, and then they're like all fucked up about it. Or they can never seem to get a girlfriend, they always get friend zoned, and eventually someone tells them, oh, it's because you're not man enough or whatever. And now there's all these like training programs that you can find out there on YouTube or whatever, in communities where there's these training programs where there'll be a man that's like, I realized that I had castrated myself and that's why I wasn't getting women, and then I took back my balls and now I get tons of women, and now I'm leading this seminar for all you castrated men, and come and I'll show you like how to like reclaim your balls and how to like be attractive to women and how to get women. There's tons of these programs out there. Have you seen these? Yeah. And then they're up on YouTube. It's like a whole new industry of men trying to like re-find their balls. And I saw this one, and this guy came up onto the stage and you could see he didn't have his balls, and the guy up on the stage who had recently regained his balls was just like, dude, he didn't say it like this, but he was like, you see your posture and you hear your voice and you see how you're like lacking self-confidence, and you see how you're too like trying to like make me like you rather than be anchored in your power. And the guy's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I think I'm just being nice.
I think the thing that's like scares women about that, from like even just my small interaction, is that it seems like it goes back to, I hate to say it in this way, like it's in that way it also is swinging too far, like to the hyper masculine kind of knuckle dragging ridiculousness. Right. And there is
and the manosphere has that then they take the pendulum and they swing it too far.
But I think there's some people that actually seem quite reasonable, and
it's a mixed bag. Yeah. But there is some in the manosphere now they've swung the pendulum too far back the other way.
Yeah, because one guy in it, and I wrote his name down, but didn't bring the notes. He goes, the one thing I didn't like that he said, because I didn't really have a lot of argument with everything, most things that he said, was that he goes, like, a manly man isn't someone that people like. And I'm like, well, I don't think that has to be the case. Like, you can totally be likable and kind and caring and still be
I don't get why people can't see that. People have really trouble integrating the opposites. And this whole pendulum thing we're talking about is it's sort of like, if I call one side of the pendulum the feminists, and let's call the other side the like angry manosphere, is they're both like screaming at the other person, you're to blame, you're bad, it's your fault, and they're both doing that. And it just seems immature that they both need to like chill out and think that maybe the other person has a reason for being upset or has something they need to listen to, and like listen to each other and have compassion for each other. And the lack of that is crazy.
Yeah, that just made me think of like, because I do think there's kind of this loud class of people that has a lot of political influence and a lot of like, influence in the media, which, I think is absolutely true. And they're usually left-leaning, college-educated people. That would be, your kind of woke-ish people. But then again, and I think certain people have brought this up and made it's very obvious. And actually, let's go with Joe Rogan's a good example, where there's this other group of people who is like, well, why? Because women like manly men, and I don't know why we're lying about that. There's a whole lot of women who like that shit, right? Just like, maybe in this other class of people that has a lot of influence, well, they think that that men should be less, visible and, quieter and, I don't know, as you put it, castrated. But they have a loud voice up here, but there's a lot of people that are not on that page that maybe don't have as much of a voice, but I think actually probably outnumber the other group. And so it's almost unfortunate that then the system of people who make decisions about how kids are kind of acculturated. And again, what happens in your house is probably the most influential thing you could do. But you have a lot of kids that are being, taught that they have to, repress themselves or be kind of these, castrated boys, or kind of like maybe over domineering women. I don't know. Like, I'm not sure that those two things are exactly true, but that they're going to engage with those other people at some point, right? Or maybe they're going to fall in love with someone who doesn't fit that, right? And so how does that person then do the work to say, oh, it's one part of what I learned is okay, but part of it's not, right? And then you have to figure out how to meld those, because we have such extreme things happening right now, such extreme narratives, that it's unfortunate, because it's going to require a lot of work for people to kind of come to a place that's actually sensible. That you can be masculine, but you can also be thoughtful. And a woman can be powerful, but can also be sensitive and, and change her role relative to the relationship that she's in, whether or not it's a man or a woman or two men, whatever that is. It's like, because really it's about a negotiation of what kind of relationship do you want to have. And so in that manosphere video, one of the guys has a wife, and she just said, well, I like our relationship the way that it is. I like doing this thing, and we've negotiated that, but that doesn't make her a problematic woman for wanting to be the homemaker and whatever, or maybe even doesn't even make him a terrible person for wanting to be the head of the household, because in their relationship, they made that decision together.
Right, totally.
And that's fair and fine. And I think the same is true.
And I think it's fucking common, actually.
And I think that same negotiation can happen at work. Like, what kind of relationship do we want to have with each other? Are we equals? Do we share the space, or am I okay? And it doesn't mean it doesn't change either, right? So in any given situation at work, I might need to ascend to like the leader role, and you need to back off. Totally. And then in some other situations it reverses.
Totally.
But people don't like that, because they just like lack of nuance, and that's bad. I'm good.
Right. Totally. Yeah. The lack of nuance, people's lack of inability to deal with complexity and nuance is a problem. Yeah,
because relationships are complex. But what I don't want to see is like, I want women to know what their power is and what they're capable of, but I also want them to know it's a negotiable. You can, all this stuff is negotiable at any given point.
Totally. And you can let you can let a man have a power, a man can let a woman have the power. Like, you can do anything you want.
Right. And then fucking own your own shit, and at least be like honest about what you're doing and what you want. And and until we get to that point, I don't know, fucking know. I don't have a lot of hope. I mean, quite honestly. I think I do in certain situations, but I think right now we're just caught in a fucking weird place.
It's gonna be a while before we get there. Shit's fucking polarized right now.
Well, that's because people get uncomfortable and don't want to have conversations that like challenge them.
People want to scapegoat and blame someone else.
Oh, definitely.
That humans want to do that, and that's what like racism and witch hunting and wars are all about.